It's now 3 o'clock. Time for the last little sutta class. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So the suttas which we have here for today, if you look at the page, the first sutta on there, ugly, apparently you wanted to have a copy of the original, and the original title in the thing which we downloaded here is called Unattractiveness. And I think it was, I think I got this correctly, there was Ajahn Brahm said unattractiveness is a very long word, and ugly is a much shorter word, and also ugly is a word with a little bit more oomph to it. So that's why we called it ugly. And I thought that's nice. You know my sense of humour and the way I think. So sometimes when we say something and give it a nice, interesting title, it just makes what's said in there a little bit more easy to understand. But anyway, that was yesterday. And for today's sutta, there's a number of suttas, and it's from the Samyutta Nikaya, and it's the the Samyutta Nikaya, and it's connected with the discourses with Citta. Now, the reason I put these in here is there is a number of very fascinating and informative suttas, but the thing which stands out in them is that Citta was a layperson, and these suttas are about him and his interaction with the Sangha at that time, and it reveals some very interesting experiences. And Citta was a very well-known disciple of the Buddha, layperson. In the end, he actually became a non-returner. So he was a very, very devout and very wonderful man. But before that, he was a general in one of the armies there. So he was obviously very strong, very well connected. But when he gave up being a general, then he became a disciple, or a lay disciple of the Buddha. And he had some very powerful meditations and also some deep understandings. And you see in these few suttas about him some of the interactions he had with the Sangha, and also the interesting one, which I've often quoted, his interaction with the leader of the Jains, Niganthanotaputta. But anyway, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to start with number 1 and then see if we can get to the sutta with the leader of the Jains at the very end. That's number 8. So anyway, the connected Samyutta Nikaya concerning Citta. Now, these would have been experiences in front of monks, in front of others, so they were seen, heard, and eventually recorded, and was recited at the first council. So even though this wasn't said by the Buddha, it wasn't said by one of the great monks or nuns at the time, nevertheless, it was so important that those monks at the first council decided to put this and include this into the collection of Buddhist suttas. So I said that it's not just the monastics who were responsible for some of these teachings. Some of these teachings were amazing teachings, again, coming from the lay supporters. So anyway, the feta. On one occasion, a number of elder bhikkhus were dwelling at Machikasanda in the wild mango grove. Now, on that occasion, when the elder bhikkhus had returned from their alms round, after their meal, they assembled in the pavilion and were sitting together when this conversation arose. Friends, the monks talking to one another. The fetter and the things that fetter. Are these things different in meaning and also different in phrasing? Or are they one in meaning and different only in phrasing? Some elder monks answered thus, friends, the fetter and the things that fetter are different in meaning and also different in phrasing. But some other elder bhikkhus answered thus, friends, the fetter and the things that fetter are one in meaning and different only in phrasing. And sometimes small things like this people talk about, but this is a very nice sutta because the person who answered the question with a simile was Citta. Now on that occasion, Citta, the householder, had arrived in Megapataka and on some business. Then Citta, the householder, heard a number of elder bhikkhus, it is said, on returning from their alms round, had assembled in the pavilion after their meal and were sitting together when this conversation arose. Then Citta, the householder, approached those elder monks, paid homage to them, sat down to one side and said to them, I have heard, Venerable Sirs, that when a number of elder monks were sitting together, this conversation arose. Friends, the fetter and the things that fetter. You find out in a moment what the actual fetter means, if you're still doubting what that word means. But anyway, it will be explained very clearly in a moment. The fetter and the things that fetter. Are these things different in meaning and also different in phrasing? Or are they one in meaning and different only in phrasing? And the monk said, that's so, householder. Venerable Sirs, said Citta, the fetter and the things that fetter are different in meaning and also different in phrasing. I will give you a simile for this, since some wise people have understand the meaning of a statement by means of a simile. Suppose, Venerable Sirs, a black ox and a white ox were yoked together by a single harness or yoke. Would one be speaking rightly if one were to say, the black ox is the fetter of the white ox ox is the fetter of the black ox? No, householder. The black ox is not the fetter of the white ox, nor is the white ox the fetter of the black ox, but rather the single harness or yoke by which the two are yoked together. That is the fetter there. So you get some idea what the fetter means and what ties you, attaches you to stuff. So too, friend, the eye is not the fetter of forms, what's seen, nor are forms the fetter of the eye, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both, and depends upon the eye and what you see. That is the fetter there. The ear is not the fetter of sounds. Sounds are not the fetter of the ear. It's just the lust and desire which arise because of those. That's what is a fetter. The nose is not the fetter of odours. The odours are not the fetter of the nose. The tongue is not the fetter of taste. Taste are not the fetter of the tongue. The body is not the fetter of tactile objects. And tactile objects are not the fetter of the body. It's when those two come together. The lust and desire that arise in dependence on both. That's the fetter. And the mind is not the fetter of mental phenomena, nor are mental phenomena the fetter of the mind, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both. That is the fetter there. And the monks replied, it is a gain for you, householder. It is well gained by you, householder, in that you have the eye of wisdom that ranges over the deep word of the Buddha. So it's a nice little example there that yes, the monks and the nuns were the leaders, but every now and again, really amazing lay people would actually answer the question for the monks and for the nuns. So do you get inspired by that? So hopefully, so this evening, for question time, we'll have a selection of the lay people and we will ask the questions. That's worth a try. But sometimes when we talk about hierarchies, and respect, you can also see just the way that Citta asked that question. He didn't say, "Oh, were you talking about this problem just a few moments ago?" He said, "I heard that this problem was being discussed." And then he said, "Well, maybe I might just give a simile." And similes, again, are always far more instructive than just words which haven't got any tie to, real life, which you can see, taste, touch, or whatever. And the simile can be far, far more meaningful, and you can remember it. It's not so much an important question for you, the fetter and the things which fetter, but nevertheless, the wisdom of Citta there, and the way he expounded it, and also the respect which those community of elder monks said to Citta. "It is a gain for you, householder. It is well gained for you, householder, in that you have the eye of wisdom that ranges over the deep word of the Buddha." So it's nice and respectful. Now the next sutta here is Siddhartha. It's a similar idea, but now we will see how it works out. On one occasion, a number of elder bhikkhus were dwelling in Machikasanda, in the wild mango grove. Then Citta the householder approached those elder bhikkhus, paid homage to them, sat down to one side, and said to them, "Venerable sirs, let the elders consent to accept tomorrow's meal from me." The elder bhikkhus consented by silence. I've said to you many times here, because I'm too busy to say anything, that doesn't mean that I'm consenting by silence when you ask this or that. That was only the tradition over in India at that time. The elder bhikkhus consented by silence. Then Citta the householder, having understood the elders had consented, rose from his seat, paid homage to them, and departed, keeping them on his right. Remember that to honor somebody, you always keep them on their right when you depart. When the night has passed, in the morning, the elder monks dressed, took their bowls and outer robes, then went to the residence of Citta the householder. There they sat down to one side, and said to the venerable chief elder, this is the elder in the, Citta the householder approached the elder bhikkhus, paid homage to them, sat down to one side, and said to the venerable chief elder, "Venerable elder, it is said, diversity of elements. In what way, venerable sir, has the diversity of elements been spoken of by the Blessed One?" When this was said, the venerable chief elder was silent. And the second time and the third time, Citta the householder asked the same question. And the second time and the third time, the venerable chief elder was silent. Now on that occasion, the venerable Isiddhata was the most junior bhikkhu in that sangha. Then the venerable Isiddhata said to the venerable chief elder, "Allow me, venerable elder, to answer Citta the householder's question." Now, first of all, it shows something which I found really a bit strange, but very beautiful in just the culture of Buddhist monasticism. Usually, if a person has a question, they ask the most senior monk or senior nun in the assembly, and if they don't know the answer, and a junior nun does, or the junior nun or junior monk does say, "Oh, ask me, I know the answer, this is the answer." You don't sort of interrupt, you just say, let the senior monk or the senior nun sort of have a go first of all. And then the beautiful, "May I try to answer the question, venerable sir?" You always had to restrain yourself, so only one monk or one nun would actually be speaking at a time. It may sound a bit strange to you, but that's how I was trained in Thailand as a junior monk. Your job was just to support the senior monk. And so it was when I first came here to Australia. Ajahn Brahm was senior to me, so he did all the talking. And I would sit quietly next to him, making sure that he had everything he needed, but wouldn't say anything. Just like before last night, these 4 amazing nuns were very silent. At least when I was here, I don't know what they got up to afterwards. But I'm sure they're really good. And then last night is one of the other reasons I wanted them to speak with you, just to show that they're very wise as well. They're not just sitting there doing nothing. Because when I did that, the first about 4 or 5 months when I came to to Australia, I would always be very quiet. And then what happened? Ajahn Chakra went to Thailand, have a bit of R&R and visit all the Ajahn Chah was sick by then. And when he went, I had to give the talk. So the very first Friday night, when I opened my mouth and gave the Dhamma talk that evening, afterwards one of the Thai ladies and her daughter came, and after I gave my talk, the daughter was only about 11 years of age or something. She came up to me, and she was being quite sort of respectful, not cheeky. She was just shocked. She said to me, "You can talk." I've been coming every weekend with my mum, and you've been so quiet, I thought you were brain damaged. She wasn't being naughty, it was just like an 11-year-old, that's what she expected. And then I told her, just when the senior monk talks, I'm quiet. And when the senior monk goes, then I talk. And there was some restraint there, but it's also very beautiful as well, just the training that one person speaks at a time. And of course, seeing it when people sometimes argue, or and then 2 people talking to but you said this, but I said this, blah, blah. And when you're trained just to one person speaking at a time, that doesn't make any sense that 2 or 3 people speak it together. You've got no restraint. So anyway, this is what was happening here. The elder monk was quiet, and then the junior monk, before he sort of gave the answer, he asked permission first of all from the senior. So, may I answer the question? And it was Isiddhata, the most junior bhikkhu. Allow me, Venerable Elder, to answer Citta the householder's question. Answer it, friend Isiddhata. Now, householder, are you asking thus, Venerable Elder, it is said, diversity of elements, diversity of elements. In what way, Venerable Sir, has the diversity of elements been spoken of by the Blessed One, the Buddha? Yes, Venerable Sir. The diversity of elements, householder, has been spoken of by the Blessed One thus. The I element, the form element, the I consciousness element, all the way down to every one of these 6 senses, the mind element, mental phenomena element, mind consciousness element. In this way, householder, that the diversity of elements has been spoken of by the Blessed One. Is usually a well-known answer, but nevertheless, the Isiddhata answered it. Then Citta the householder, having delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Isiddhata's words, with his own hands served and satisfied the elder monks with the various kinds of delicious food. When the elder bhikkhus had finished eating and had put away their bowls, they rose from their seats and departed. Then the Venerable Chief Elder said to Venerable Isiddhata, "It is good, friend Isiddhata, that the answer to this question occurred to you. The answer did not occur to me. Therefore, friend Isiddhata, whenever a similar question comes up at some other time, you should clear it up." The elder praised him. Now that's not so interesting just by itself, but then when we get to number 2, and I think it's just 2 Isiddhatas, I think, in this one. Or is there 3? There's 3, isn't there? Yes. And there is 2 Isiddhatas here. So then, this one, Citta the householder. Okay. Then Citta the householder approached the elder bhikkhus, paid homage to them, sat down to one side, and said to the Venerable Chief Elder, "Venerable Elder, there are various views that arise in the world. The world is eternal, the world is not eternal, the world is finite, or the world is infinite. The soul and the body are the same. The soul is one thing, the body is another. The Tathagata, the Buddha, exists after death, or the Buddha does not exist after death, or the Buddha both exists and does not exist after death, or the Buddha neither exists nor does not exist after death. These, as well as the 62 views mentioned in the Brahmajala. The Brahmajala Sutta is the very first sutta recited at the meeting of those 500 arahats and in the Satapana cave outside of Rajagaha. And that was the meeting where they got all the teachings together. It was interesting. It started off, with the first sutta in the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses, called the Brahmajala, talking about wrong view first of all. Okay, this is not the right view, not taught by the Buddha, so that at least people would understand not to get lost in wrong view. And so, these, as well as the 62 views mentioned in the Brahmajala. Now, when what exists, do these views come to be? When what is non-existent, do these views not come to be? In other words, what is the cause of these wrong views? How is it they come to exist in people? When this was said, the Venerable Chief Elder was silent. A second time and a third time, Citta the householder asked the same question. And a second time and a third time, the Venerable Chief Elder was silent. Now on that occasion, the Venerable Isiddhata was the most junior bhikkhu in that Sangha. Then the Venerable Isiddhata said to the Venerable Chief Elder, "Allow me, Venerable Elder, to answer Citta the householder's question." Again, he asked permission. "Answer it, friend Isiddhata." "Now, householder, are you asking thus? Venerable Elder, there are various views that arise in the world. The world is eternal, etc. These, as well as the 62 speculative views mentioned in the Brahmajala. Now, when what exists, do these views come to be? When what is non-existent, do these views not come to be?" "Yes, Venerable Sir." And Isiddhata answers, "As to the various views that arise in the world, householder, the world is eternal, these as well as the 62 speculative views mentioned in the Brahmajala. When there is identity view, this is Sakkaya Ditthi, identity view, these views come to be. When there is no identity view, these views do not come to be. But, Venerable Sir, I said Sakkaya Ditthi, that which is identity view. That is the first of the fetters, of the 10 fetters which stop you being enlightened. And that particular fetter, identity view, is the main one of the first 3 fetters, which once you see through that and abandon identity view, then you find you are a stream winner. First stage of enlightenment. But, Venerable Sir, asked Citta, how does identity view come to be? The idea that there's a self in something. Here, householder, replies Isiddhata, the uninstructed worldling, who has no regard for the noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma. That's a standard phrase for someone who is not a stream winner or even close. Who has no regard for the good persons and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma. They regard form, stuff, like especially your body, regards form as self, or as self-possessing form, or form as somehow inside of self, or self as inside of form. He regards feeling, this Vedana, which I prefer calling experience. You regard experience as self, or as experience as possessing, or as the self as possessing experience. It's one of the attributes of your soul. Or experience as within self, or the self as within form. Or you regard perception as self, or as self as possessing perception, or as perception as within a self, a soul, or as a self, a soul as within perception, or volitional formations as self. And again, you know that I prefer the word. I must agree it's not 100% accurate to call this will, but it's the most of the volitional formations. And it's more powerful if I just focus on that part of volitional formations, which is the active part, rather than the resulting part. And we call that will. Or you regard will as your soul, yourself. Or as yourself as possessing will. That your self, your soul, is the driver of the bus. Or as the will as in self. Or as the self as somehow within will. Or you regard consciousness, one of the 6 consciousnesses, as self. Or as the self as possessing consciousness. The self is somehow bigger than consciousness. The soul is bigger than consciousness, but the soul possesses consciousness. Or consciousness is somehow within self. Or self as in consciousness. In such a way that identity view comes to be. Now, I'm just going to go down to skip a paragraph, because here there's a very beautiful explanation from the Patisambhidamagga. It's a text which is agreed that it happened after the council, but it is almost like a prototype, a beginning of what eventually became the Abhidhamma, and they're trying to get some more explanations of some of these suttas. Very, very early, not the same, not including the concepts of the Abhidhamma, but having some lovely commentaries. And this is the explanation of this from the Abhidhamma. They're trying to give some more explanation with some similes this time, of what that actually means of identity view, what it means that the self, the soul, your idea of an atta, an atma or whatever, that either in any of these 5 khandhas, or that 5 khandhas possessing that soul, or the soul is within, or the khandha is within. Khandha is the 5 components of existence. And this is how the Patisambhidamagga puts it. One who is an Aryan does not regard the mind as a permanent essence, like the flame and hue as a lamp. They don't have the identity that any part of your body, your experience, perception, will or consciousness, you don't regard that as the same as, like the flame and the hue of the lamp. You do not regard the mind or the self or the soul as possessing a permanent essence, like the tree has a shadow. The shadow is not the tree, but the tree possesses a shadow. You think that's the self, the soul, and any of these 5 components of existence. You do not regard the mind as within a permanent essence, like the scent in a flower. The scent is not the flower, but the flower, the scent is within the flower. Like some people think that a self or soul is within consciousness. And lastly, you do not regard a permanent essence as within the mind. So that's the last one. Just like a jewel in a casket. So Instead, we regard the mind as part of the 5 components of existence, being the 6th of the 6 consciousnesses. And so, Venerable Sir, going upper paragraph now, how does identity view not come to be? Here, householder, the instructed noble disciple, who has regard for the noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for the good persons and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, does not regard form or body as a self or a soul, or as a self as possessing form, or form as within self, or self as within form. He does not regard experience, the Vedana, or the perception, the will, or any of the consciousnesses as self, or self as within consciousness. Or, I missed out a couple there, but they're right at the top there. It is in such a way that identity view does not come to be. So it is not just, sometimes I'm amazed to hear this, that sometimes that people who don't have good instructions or understanding or experience of reading the suttas, sometimes they look at Sakkaya Ditthi. That's what this is being explained here. The 5 khandhas, the 5 components of existence. They're not you, they're not yours, there's not a self in there or out of there or anywhere belonging to it or outside of it. So, but sometimes people think, Sakkaya Ditthi, what does that literally mean? If you analyze it linguistically, it means with a body, the view of with body. So sometimes people say, well, as long as you realize that the body is not yourself, then that's your stream winner. That's what they say. It's ridiculous. Literally, it might mean that. Just by, please excuse this, but I got this from a cryptic crossword. Sometimes I like doing cryptic crosswords. It just makes my brain sort of keep working at 70 and to get new ideas sometimes, because this was a little puzzle. I think the cryptic clue, it was like giving clues which, describing the answer, but in a weird way. And it was like working with your friends to capture her. And the answer was to get her. Together. If you write down to get her, T-O-G-E-T-H-E-R, what does it mean? It's together. So sometimes if you analyze, if you don't know English and you see the phrase to get together, so what does that mean? It means to capture that woman, to get her. And of course it never is used in that way at all. But nevertheless, in Pali, sometimes words like that, you have to be very careful. How did the Buddha use that word? And then you see that in this particular case, Sakkaya Ditthi is very well explained by the Buddha again and again and again. It does not mean just the view that your body is yourself. It means all these other 5 khandhas, that even the mental part of you, the feeling or experience, perception, will, and consciousnesses. Now, pause there, because that's an important part of Dhamma, and it's one of the other reasons I put it out here. It was a very lovely piece of teachings of the Buddha. Any questions on that? Yeah.
Just a question regarding the sense of self and what that actually is defined as, because it clearly states that these are the things that is not self.
Yeah.
Is the sense of self just like the illusion that there's something permanent? Or how is it actually defined?
Okay. How it's defined, it's always understood as like a permanent essence. Who actually are you? Inside, not just the body, not just things which changes from day to day or week to week, year to year. Now, what is the essence of you? And to give you a simile for this, and it's also, it really should be researched a bit more, that we have the word in Pali is atta. In Sanskrit, it was known as Atman, the essence, the soul, if you like. But many people talk about a soul, but it's very hard to describe it. But in science, we had a very similar word, the atom. And the atom is a Greek word. It means indivisible, the essential building block of stuff, and it cannot be split according to the Greeks, because the whole word meant the fundamental particle of nature, the atom. Atom, atma. There must be a connection there, because the Greek philosophy and Indian philosophy, they were connected there. So you always say the great Kiwi Rutherford split the atom, but he was very late, because the great Indian Buddha, he split the Atma a long time before that. You get an idea that we always want to find, logically, reductionist philosophy, trying to find out what is at the heart of this. What is the fundamental particle which builds up this world? What's the fundamental thing which builds you up? Who are you? The Atma. And of course, that is the idea of it has to be permanent, otherwise it doesn't really fit. If it's not permanent, it's not indivisible. And you have the Atma, indivisible, the self, the soul. And of course, that creates a lot of interest for human beings to find out what exactly that is. It's important. It's basically the quest of the spiritual life. But to be able to find that out for yourself, not just by believing in some monk or nun or in some book, find it out for yourself. It's very shocking. You go to the heart of things. Imagine, I said, just finding out one of the important parts of the 5 components of existence, volitional formations, the will. To actually see that for yourself, the illusory nature of that. I mean, not just to believe it or work it out by logic, but actually see it, know it, be right in front of it. And when that happens, first of all, you don't want to see it to begin with, because it just really messes up the way that you've looked at your life for lifetimes. But actually, when you see that it's like someone has taken over your will. They're not, there's no will left. But it's true. Wisdom, insight takes a lot of courage. Real wisdom. Because you have to let go of stuff. So that's just with like the will, and then you get the mind as well. What is the mind? This faculty of knowing. Even when the 5 external senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, vanish. And it's easy to see that during the jhana experience. But when? Then that mind starts to vanish too. And it vanishes slowly. So you can see it happening. And once it does see it happening, that is also scary. It's like you're disappearing. You're vanishing. You're going. If there's any attachment there, you don't want to let it go. That's why it does take a lot of courage, but sometimes people's commitment to truth is so strong. They're willing to give their life to find out the truth. Some of these investigative journalists. But even more than that, to find out the truth of who you are, you have to let go of a lot there too. Anyway, I'll carry on here, but thank you for that question. Venerable Sir, having given the answer to the question there in a very wonderful way, the Citta asks, Venerable Sir, where does Master Isidatta come from? That's twice he's been impressed by this young monk's wisdom. And he said, I come from Avanti, householder. There is, Venerable Sir, a cladsman from Avanti named Isidatta, like a layperson, an unseen friend of ours who has gone forth. has a Venerable One ever met that Isidatta, my old friend? Yes, householder. Where is that Venerable One now, dwelling, Venerable Sir? When this was said, the Venerable Isidatta was silent. Is the Master, said Citta, Isidatta? Yes, householder. Now, similar to that story I said about being in Vietnam, sitting next to a guy who met Ajahn Brahm. I said, yes, I've met Ajahn Brahm. And the Vietnamese, Master Isidatta is far more restrained, much better, well done. So when he realized that Citta knew about this monk, then he said, then let Master Isidatta delight in the delightful wild mango grove at Machikasanda. I will be zealous in providing Master Isidatta with robes, alms food, lodgings, and medical requisites. That is kindly said, householder. Then Citta the householder, having delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Isidatta's words, with his own hand served and satisfied the elder bhikkhus with the various kinds of delicious food. When the elder bhikkhus had finished eating and had put away their bowls, they rose from their seats and departed. Then the Venerable Chief Elder said to Venerable Isidatta, it is good, friend Isidatta, that the answer to this question occurred to you. The answer did not occur to me. Therefore, friend Isidatta, whenever a similar question comes up at some other time, you should clear it up. Then, the Venerable Isidatta set his lodging in order, and taking bowl and robe, he left Machikasanda. When he left Machikasanda, he left for good, and he never returned. Why, do you think? It was because he realized that he'd just done a marvelous teaching there, really impressed Citta, and now was the time, if he wanted to live a simple life as a monk, time to go. Otherwise, attachments, preferential treatment, every time that somebody wanted to have a question answered, they'd always come and bother him. And that would be very difficult for the other monks. Be careful. If you are young and you answer the questions really well and you're very impressive, you have to leave. As in the next sutta, which is even more interesting. On one occasion, a number of elder bhikkhus were dwelling at Machikasanda in the wild mango grove. Then Citta the householder approached those elder bhikkhus, paid homage to them, sat down to one side and said to them, Venerable sirs, let the elders consent to accept tomorrow's meal for me in my cowshed. Now, when you hear that, you think, inviting monks to a cowshed? If you invited me to your house and you said, please come into my cowshed, what would you do, venerable nuns? But it was just the culture in those days that sometimes when they would invite the Buddha in to actually a great meal, celebration, they would smear the walls with fresh cow dung. That was supposed to be just a beautiful smell in those days. Honestly. But anyway, that doesn't really matter. But the elder bhikkhus consented by silence. Then Citta the householder, having understood that the elders had consented, rose from his seat, paid homage to them, and departed, keeping them on his right. When the night had passed, in the morning, the elder bhikkhus dressed, took their bowls and outer robes, and went to the cowshed of Citta the householder. There they sat down on the appointed seats. Then Citta the householder, with his own hand, served and satisfied the elder bhikkhus with delicious milk rice made with ghee. When the elder bhikkhus had finished eating and had put away their bowls, they rose from their seat and departed. Then Citta the householder, having said, give away the remainder, followed close behind the elder bhikkhus. Now on that occasion, the heat was sweltering, and the elders went along as if their bodies were melting because of the food they had eaten. It was very rich food. Now on that occasion, the Venerable Mahaka was the most junior bhikkhu in that Sangha. Then the Venerable Mahaka said to the Venerable Chief Elder, "It would be good, Venerable Elder, if a cool wind would blow and a canopy of clouds would form and the sky would drizzle." "That would be good, friend," said the elder. Then the Venerable Mahaka performed such a feat of spiritual power that a cool wind blew and a canopy of clouds formed and the sky drizzled. Then it occurred to Citta, the householder, such is the spiritual power and might possessed by the most junior bhikkhu in the Sangha. Wow. I never said wow. It's not wow, I did that, sorry. Then the Venerable Mahaka arrived at the monastery. He said to the Venerable Chief Elder, "Is this much enough, Venerable Elder?" "That's enough, friend Mahaka. What's been done is sufficient, friend Mahaka. What's been offered is sufficient." Then the elder bhikkhus went to their dwellings, and the Venerable Mahaka went to his own dwelling, little hut. Then Citta, the householder, approached the Venerable Mahaka, paid homage to him, sat down to one side and said to him, "It would be good, Venerable Sir, if Master Mahaka would show me a superhuman miracle of spiritual power." He knew that he could do this because he just created clouds and a wind and some drizzle to keep everyone cool. That was pretty impressive, but he wanted more. Would you do the same? Anyway, this is what happened. Then, householder, spread your cloak upon the veranda. Like even the lay people wear robes like these, maybe not quite the same colour, the same size, but similar, very simple. Spread your outer robe, your robe, upon the veranda, and scatter a bundle of grass upon it. "Yes, Venerable Sir," Citta the householder replied, and he spread his cloak upon the veranda and scattered a bundle of grass upon it. Then, when the monk had entered his dwelling and shut the bolt, the Venerable Mahaka performed a feat of spiritual power, such that a flame shot through the keyhole and the chink of the door and burned the grass, but not the cloak. Ooh. Thank you. Citta the householder shook out his cloak and stood to one side, shocked and terrified. Even though he's this great householder, if you saw such a spiritual power like that, you'd be shocked and terrified too. It's weird that people are like, "I want to see this, I want to see this," but as soon as you say, "Ah!" and you're out of here. Then the Venerable Mahaka came out of his dwelling and said to Citta the householder, "Is this much enough, householder?" "That's enough, that's enough, Venerable Mahaka. What's been done is sufficient, Venerable Mahaka. What's been offered is sufficient. Let Master Mahaka delight in the delightful wild mango grove at Machika Chanda. I will be zealous in providing Master Mahaka with robes, arms, food, lodgings, and medical requisites." "That is kindly said, householder." What happened next? Then the Venerable Mahaka set his lodging in order, and taking bowl and robe, he left Machika Sanda. When he left Machika Sanda, he left for good, and he never returned. That's really fascinating. So, that's one of the reasons why if you ask, say, Ajahn Brahm to do a psychic power, please don't, because if he does, then he won't come back again. He'll go to Norway or somewhere. That's our tradition. And again, because as a monk or as a nun, we're not supposed to try and be famous. Maybe famous for teaching the Dhamma, fine. But for doing psychic powers, when Ajahn Chah passed away. Because, that he was a very famous monk. And at the funeral service, all the TV cameras were there. And the king of Thailand, the royal family were there too. And so they interviewed a couple of senior monks and asked them, in Thai, did Ajahn Chah do any psychic powers you can tell us? And the monk said, no, we can't say anything. And then they asked one of the chief lay people there, did Ajahn Chah do any psychic powers you can tell us? And the lay person said, yes. I saw this many times with my own eyes. And the TV cameras were just like you, they were really looking at you. And the lay person said, many times I saw Ajahn Chah teach the Dhamma and spread the Dhamma to thousands. Mm-hmm. He said that all the other monks, because that is the psychic power, the only psychic power which the Buddha praised. And afterwards they came and some of them spoke to me, so I wish we'd have thought of that. Just like Citta the householder. It is a better answer. Anyway, now the last little sutta in here, Niganta Nataputta. He was the leader of the Jains, the one who I told the story about when he died. And we had the delightful discourse as a result of that. Now on that occasion, Niganta Nataputta had arrived at Machika Sanda together with a large retinue of Niganta, of Jains. Citta the householder heard about this and together with a number of lay followers approached Niganta Nataputta. He exchanged greetings with Niganta Nataputta, and when they had concluded their greetings and cordial talks, he sat down to one side. Niganta Nataputta then said to him, householder, do you have faith in the ascetic Gautama, what we call the Buddha? Do you have faith in the ascetic Gautama when he says there is a concentration without thought and examination, a samadhi, a stillness, without vitaka and vichara, without thought and examination? That there is a cessation of thought and examination. And Citta replied, in this matter, Venerable Sir, I do not go by faith in the Blessed One. When he says there is a samadhi, stillness, a concentration without thought and examination, there is a cessation of thought and examination. I do not go by faith in the Blessed One in this. When this was said, Niganta Nataputta looked up proudly towards his own retinue and said, see this, sirs? See this? How straightforward is this Citta the householder? How honest and open. One who thinks that thought and examination can be stopped might imagine he could catch the wind in a net or stop the current of the river Ganges with his own fist. And Citta replies, what do you think, Venerable Sir? Which is superior, knowledge or faith? Knowledge, householder, is superior to faith. Well, Venerable Sir, to whatever extent I wish, secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, I enter and dwell in the first jhana, which is accompanied by the vitaka vichara with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. Then to whatever I want, extent I wish, with the subsiding of vitaka vichara, I enter and dwell in the second jhana. Then to whatever extent I wish, with the fading away as well as rapture, I enter and dwell in the third jhana. Then to whatever extent I wish, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, I enter and dwell in the fourth jhana. Since I know and see thus, Venerable Sir, in what other ascetic or Brahmin need I place faith regarding the claim that there is a samadhi, a stillness without vitaka vichara, without thought and examination, a cessation of this? When this was said, Niganta Nataputta looked askance at his own retinue and said, see this, sirs, how crooked is this Citta the householder, how fraudulent and deceptive. Just now, Venerable Sir, we understood you to say, See this, sirs, how straightforward is this Citta, the household, how honest and open. Yet now we understand you to say, see this, how crooked is this Citta, the household, how fraudulent and deceptive. If your former statement is true, Venerable Sir, then your latter statement is false. But if your former statement is false, then your latter statement is true. Further, Venerable Sir, these 10 reasonable questions come up. When you understand a meeting, then you might respond to me along with your retinue. One question, one synopsis, blah, blah, blah. Then Citta the household arose from his seat and departed without having asked Nigantha these 10 reasonable questions. Now, you may find that a little bit sort of putting down other people's religions. But what was important there was, to me anyway, there was Nigantha had no idea of jhanas. He didn't know just how the mind could be so still that no thought could come up. He said that was impossible. Like catching the wind in a net or stopping the Ganges by your own fist. That such stillness could be there. And when sometimes people say that, that jhanas were well understood in the time of the Buddha, that it was common knowledge. I often quote that because Nigantha was noticed probably the most prominent. Some scholars say more prominent than the Buddha at that time. The biggest number of followers, the most well known. And he didn't know that such a thing like jhana could exist. And when Citta, he was a household, he hadn't ordained. He could get those jhanas. He knew that within those jhanas everything stopped and was still. It can be done. When he knew that, he knew how powerful these teachings are. But it also reminded me that, as it says in other parts in the suttas, that was one of the great discoveries of the Buddha. The Buddha who discovered jhanas is in one of the Samyuttas. And when you see that, you see that other people just didn't know that those things existed. One of the reasons why was to be able to experience those jhanas. It's not only a lot of letting go is required, but a lot of physical comfort too. So when the Buddha or the Bodhisattva hadn't become the Buddha yet, decided to try that, he realized that with his body just so weak, hadn't eaten properly, hadn't washed, then he fasted trying to get to enlightenment that way through asceticism. He realized that's not the way you're going to get close to the jhanas. So he rested, got his body healthy again, washed, and that's when he chose this beautiful place called Bodh Gaya. And he may have been there, and you see what it's like now, so busy. But you can imagine what it must have been like when the river Nirangela was full, was flowing, it was so natural, few people there, and a beautiful grove there. You could find a nice tree and sit comfortably underneath it. You may not realize just the importance of having a very good meal from Sujata. It was a meal which was supposed to be an offering to a heavenly being. Instead, Sujata offered it to the Buddha. A really good meal. Cool tree, beautiful park, next to the river, quiet, secluded. And that's where we got our Buddha from. And I emphasize that softness, that gentleness, that peace, because that's an important part of the practice. And when the first 5 disciples who were with the Buddha beforehand, when they saw him relaxing, resting, they thought he'd given up. Said, if you can't be enlightened being ascetic, how on earth are you going to be enlightened and get anywhere when you're having a good meal? And there was a powerful teaching which he gave. Not indulging the body, but not exhausting it and tiring it out. When the Buddha did that, that's where the Buddha became enlightened. And taught people afterwards. The middle way. Second part of the Noble the second factor of the Eightfold Path. Renunciation, kindness and gentleness. Those last two words, kindness and gentleness, how beautiful those words were. If you get please excuse me, if you get a monk or a nun who walks behind you when you're meditating, hits you on the back, if you're dull, that's not kindness. If you get a monk who says you're tired, go to bed, have a rest. That's kindness. The gentleness and also the patience. It will happen, just give it time. So that is the path. And hopefully you can feel its power. It's not indulgence. It's working with your body, with your mind, to the very, very best. Arahang Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Suwakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Very good. Now do sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Very good. Okay, apparently these Buddha statues over here, that some people are going to take them home after the retreat, which is fine, we share them out. But they want them blessed. The best blessing is just leaving up here until tomorrow. And at the same time that this evening when we do the chanting, I'll do a little bit extra chanting, just to make sure that those Buddha statues are blessed. Is that okay for you? Okie dokie. Okay, so now some interviews or meditation. Have a wonderful time.